What's the greatest physical evidence you've ever come across in all of your research and studies and everything?
How about the fucking dead alien we unveiled at the Mondrian that no one gave a fuck about? How about that? Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was hoping you'd talk about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Can you tell us about? Can you tell us
the
about
dead alien.
what you've excavated?
Oh yeah, sure. So
We should have opened
Just
by
a
talking
little
about
thing.
this.
Yeah.
We
I
didn't
didn't
know that
if
we
were
could
allowed
talk
to
about it.
oh,
She
absolutely.
told
Okay.
me you weren't
I
allowed
thought we weren't
to.
allowed to.
Tanya, I
That's.
told.
Oh,
I
no,
was
of
told
course.
I wasn't allowed to talk
No,
about
we
it.
can talk
Okay.
about
Which,
it.
by the way, before we even go any further, that's how fucked up all this is that whenever you're getting in the media, you're like, can we talk about this?
Yes.
Are we allowed
Most
to?
of the time, it's like, I don't know if you can talk about
But
this.
apparently
Okay.
the answer is yes. Tell
Okay.
us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So September of last year, there was a super viral story. We could throw the picture up. There's a Mexican journalist named Jaime Maussan, 60 Minutes of Mexico, legendary dude. He brought these two dead alien-looking things in front of the Mexican Senate, and everyone had a good laugh and went super viral. And everyone was hitting me up and asking me, like, is it real? Is it fake? I'm like, how would I know, right? Like leaders in the UFO field who I was going to ask them if it's real. They're asking me because there was pressure on them to make a public statement. So my buddy Serena DC and I went down to Mexico in January.
Whoop, shout out Serena. Whoop, whoop.
Shout out to Serena. And so I'm sitting in Jaime's office. They were very nice. They actually brought the two bodies to the office for us to see. It's right in front of me. And my friends back in LA are texting me stories that are breaking that day, right? And there were dozens of them from all the major news outlets saying, it's all bullshit. The Peruvian Ministry of Culture has confiscated the bodies and did extensive DNA testing, and it's just chicken bones and glue. There's nothing to see here.
I've read that.
And there's a picture of the bodies that they confiscated, and they're wearing like dresses and
Yeah.
sombreros, and it's the stupidest shit ever,
Yeah.
right? So I'm looking at the article, and then I'm looking at the actual bodies that are in front of me, and I'm like, okay, number one, if you confiscated the bodies, then how the fuck are they right in front of me,
Yeah. right?
And then number two, this is clearly not the same thing. Right?
Clearly.
Like I'm looking at the pictures and look at the bodies, and this is not the same thing.
Wow.
So then I'm introduced to a guy named Dr. Jose Zalce, who was he's a lieutenant colonel in the Mexican Navy. He was the head of all health research and development for the Mexican Navy, an expert in DNA forensics, forensic anthropology, forensic dentistry.
Wow.
He was saying these are real. They're 1,000 years old. They were not assembled. We don't know what they are. It's about 70. The DNA shows that about 70% of this is a genetic hybrid of humans, chimps, and bonobos. And there were clear indications in the DNA that these had been engineered.
So
Right.
genetically manipulated.
Genetically manipulated.
1,000 years ago.
1,000 years ago. So who was doing
Right.
that, right? Also, one of them was pregnant with eggs in her belly, and with a breastplate that was like perfectly surgically implanted, made of metals like osmium, which humans didn't even know about until the 20th century, right? So this was strange. And then they were like, hey, we're going to go to Peru because there's some new bodies and you can film us taking possession of the new bodies. So we're like, yeah, cool, let's do that. So we went to Peru, and I'll give you some images that you can throw up. And we saw just the most incredible. It looks like something out of a Hollywood movie.
How many bodies are there?
There are supposedly a few dozen, but these are being dug up by a grave robber who's just been selling them to Russian oligarchs on the black market, right? So there's this frantic effort to try to acquire these and preserve them. So some of them are at the University of Ica in Peru, where they've been extensively studied, but they're calling on international scientists to, participate in studying these. And so we did a press conference at the Mondrian Hotel in West Hollywood. It was a complete shit show. There were all these technical,
We
'cause you
were there, yeah.
but we had like a bunch of news outlets there, Fox and others. Nobody ended up covering it.
There were tons of news
Crazy.
outlets. There
Yeah.
were so many. I was surprised when I came in. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is huge.
Yeah, not a single story ran.
What? That's
And
what
Why do you
mean.
think?
well, I think partly because the technical difficulties with the translation was irritating, but they were there for 3 hours. They filmed for 3 hours. They had press kits. I know from one journalist who was there, who I won't name, he was very excited to write a story, and his editor killed it because the editor said everyone knows these are fake.
Oh, God.
So that's the edit. The propaganda has been so effective, right? Speaking of the fake ones, while we were in Peru, we met the guy who made the fake Dahl, the fake replica,
Yeah.
right? Which the Ministry of Culture confiscated, that was wearing the dress and the hat.
What did he have to say about this?
So he made it to sell it to tourists. He was trying to capitalize on tourism, right? In his town, which is Palpa, which is next to Nazca. Everyone calls these the Nazca alien mummies. They're actually found in Palpa, but no one's ever heard of Palpa, which is why everyone calls it Nazca. So he's like, oh, we're going to put Palpa on the map, And so he made these. And when the Ministry of Culture confiscated it, he told them, he said, no, this is a work of art. I made this. This is not the real thing. They ignored that, right? And then claimed they did DNA testing on it and then said it's all fake, right? So a couple weeks after our press conference, there was another press conference in Lima, in Peru, and we had American scientists, extremely esteemed forensic scientists come out. They examined the bodies. They said publicly at this press conference, we don't know what these things are, but they're not constructed, right? Because that's always the criticism, is that somebody assembled these from, human mummies and a llama skull and whatever, and that's not the case, right? I mean, the joints show the wear and tear you'd expect to see on a body that walked around and used the skeleton. There's absolutely no indications of manipulation.
And they're preserved in like diatomaceous earth and stuff, right?
Yeah, so they're amazingly well preserved because they were preserved in diatomaceous earth in a cave. So they've got organs, brain matter, skin
Wild.
intact. I mean,
Insane.
whoever buried these
Insane.
things knew exactly what they were doing, right? So at that press conference in Lima, the Peruvian Ministry of Culture actually showed up and raided the press conference. And you can see the footage. It's fucking crazy. Like it's these old ladies with clipboards coming in and saying, we're shutting this down. And they're trying to pull the microphone away from the Peruvian journalists and the American scientists who are there. I mean, these people are so stupid, like they've been trying to kill this story for so long. And then they're like, what will finally make this story die? Let's raid the press conference in front of the international press. That's what they did.
Can you tell us a little bit about Jaime Maussan's involvement? Because isn't he like the Walter Cronkite of Mexico? Doesn't he host 60 Minutes and he backed the
did,
story?
yeah.
Wasn't he discredited for backing the story?
Oh yeah. I mean, Jaime has taken nothing but shit for this story, and everyone calls him a hoaxer. If you read any article about this, they'll say known hoaxer Jaime Maussan. The dude was the face of 60 Minutes in Mexico. He's been a journalist longer than I've been alive. He's broken thousands of stories. A few of those stories turned out to be incorrect. That doesn't mean he's deliberately
He's an
misleading
investigative
Of course, yeah,
journalist.
that's what he does.
I mean, isn't that the point?
But anyone who gets involved in telling these kinds of stories is held to an impossible standard. I
Yeah.
mean, look at the mainstream media. All they do is fucking lie about everything, right? But if you make one mistake, talking about UFOs, you're a hoaxer, you're a liar, whatever.
Didn't he win a lawsuit for this?
So Jaime is suing the Ministry of Culture in Peru for $300 million for running a misinformation and smear campaign. Because
Good for him.
Yeah. And so he won a default judgment because basically they had no defense, and they didn't even respond. Right. So now there's probably going to be, now it's moving on to like the next level of appeal or whatever, but he won the first round.